was holding like this. Pull this, pull this, pull this, and poop. What? That's not normally how the waist looks like.
Bicep rotation. Not really. Ab crunch. Oh, look at that.
It broke? Oh, God, it broke.
Yeah, look at that. It just came right off.
This thing came out of the package like this, and unfortunately, it's not the kind of thing where it just pops on and it's going to stay that way, because if you move him or if you twist the waist in any way, this thing just wants to pop off, okay? I did a review of the She-Ra and Skeletor, and those are beautiful Mondo figures. That Skeletor had like ratchet joints and everything like that. I don't know what happened here, okay? I don't know if this was a different team.
And of course, that's when you start asking yourself, can you trust Mondo? So I thought I'd just put down some thoughts that I had about this particular Mondo release. I mean, yeah, I'm just going to go off the cuff here. I am one of those people who I give second chances. I always do. I mean, like, I want to believe that something is going to be right. And so far, you know, going through the history of Mondo and what they've been able to deliver, it's been a good track record. I mean, you know, for the Master Universe alone, they've had multiple releases. I mean, you know, if we were just to actually go through most of their Mondo shop and take a look at some of the, you know, collectibles that they've had over the years. I mean, you know, just taking a look at the Masters of the Universe, they've had 28 releases over the years, and just going all the way back from when they did their first release. Yeah, this was $160 at the time for their first Master Universe He-Man figure. And for the time, he looked pretty good. I mean, like, he was definitely modeled more over like a Schwarzenegger, you know what I mean? Like, that's actually, I think, what they were going for with this particular He-Man. And, you know, notwithstanding, when I was younger, always envisioned that Arnold Schwarzenegger would be the greatest, you know, stand-in for He-Man in any sort of like capacity. That was my original go-to. And then they started doing this funny thing with the head, right? That was something that they'd always do. And it was cool, you know, it's a little bit of nod to the original Master Universe figures. But he had this really crazy ray gun. He had, you know, this additional sword. Very, very stylized. And for some people, it was a little bit too stylized. As a matter of fact, when I first saw this, I wasn't even the target audience, I think, because this was way outside my comfort zone. You know, it had a skull at the end of the power sword. And, you know, there were things about this figure that I didn't like when I finally saw him. But it was a good effort. And at $160, you know, for the deluxe edition, it had some fun things. They even included this weird Filmation thing, you know, that was in like one episode. It was so freaking obscure. But then it had some other nods in it. You can see the movie Blaster from He-Man, from the Master Universe movie. So there were these things where you could tell that this was done with a lot of love. And that in and of itself is just, you know, spectacular. But looking at, you know, the second release, of course, is, you know, Mondo 16 Skeletor. You can't have He-Man without Skeletor. We already know this. So here's Skeletor, and unfortunately, this one was a miss in a lot of ways. I mean, he had the body, right? He had the torso. Of course, it was based off of the other He-Man torso, right? This is how toy companies, you know, stay in business. They actually reuse their molds and make, you know, different figures out of those molds. They created new feet, gauntlets on the legs. You know, they created this very, very stylized version of Skeletor. And some things were done, you know, a little bit, again, too stylized, particularly the face. The face is really where this, not this face is just adorable, but of course it really throws off the character, but it's part of that goofy style that Mondo had, and people can live with that. It really did identify them as a company for toys at the time. And, you know, these were high-end collectibles for 1/6 scale figures. This is the problem here. This was a Skeletor with a very, very different style of face, and that was the problem, really. They were going for a very new aesthetic, and even the power sword that he had, it had this ram's head, which was, in keeping with the character. That was his thing, right? He had this skeleton-like nature with ram's heads, but it was spooky, it was scary. And again, it was a very cool thing to look at. The problem really for me, and for a lot of people, I think, was definitely that head sculpt. That head sculpt really kind of was too much of a departure. It really was too stylistic. And it wasn't Skeletor. You know what I mean? I argue this is a better Skeletor head than the other one. That was a big thing, right? So I think people picked this up mainly because they wanted a Skeletor to go with their He-Man. That's very, very relatable, 100%. And then, you know what? We got deeper, much, much deeper, right? The very next one was arguably probably their best in the line at the time. This was the Man-at-Arms. This was where they really started to shine. I mean, like, look at this guy. He is absolutely fantastic. Like, seriously, he's got armor everywhere. He is the Man-at-Arms. He's armored up to the nines. He's got blasters. He's got a shield. He's got a mace. He's got, goggles, an extra head. This is Duncan. This is the Man-at-Arms. And he really did look the part. I mean, just look at this guy. He looks grizzled. He looks old. He looks like, weathered. He is an old soldier. That's exactly what comes off when you see this particular version of Duncan, and I love it. This is what I'm looking for in an adult collectible, with some style. Like, seriously, I love what they've done with the character. The grizzled face, the armor, which is very, very familiar, but then at the same time very different. The new belt, right? That huge, gigantic mace, which is just absolutely oversized, right? And he reuses parts everywhere. This is the same buck that they've been using for years. It's never really failed them until recently. We're going to get into that, right? But I'm still looking for this guy. I missed out on him, and I'm really regretting that I missed out on him, because now he's commanding crazy prices. And I just love what they've done with this guy. They did not hold back with this version of Duncan, and it really does show. Then again, there's a lot of love put here. It really does showcase what they're capable of doing as a company. And then it just kept going on and on at this point. They kept getting release after release, but it did keep getting better. I mean, Faker, arguably, it's there. He's not bad. He's not bad as Faker, right? I mean, he's He-Man with blue skin. And with that, the way he's chiseled, the way he looks, you could probably overlook the certain failings of the He-Man sculpt here. Of course, again, he comes off looking like a red-haired version of Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is good and bad in its own right. But again, as I said, there are good things about these figures, the earliest ones, and there are less desirable things about them. But then, they really started digging in deep and started getting, different characters along the lines, including Merman. Merman was a very good figure. I think, again, they took those strengths that were allotted into the figures that they had, and really, we have the 3 different heads in this case, and that was a big thing too, And also hearkening to the history of the character with Filmation, the crystal which calls the demon from the deep, those types of things. His various head sculpts from different eras of the character, whether it be cartoon, whether it be comic book, or whether it be the original toy from the 80s, right? That was a big deal. But I love what they've done with the lobster armor, which has been carried over in multiple ways with different iterations of the character, from Masterverse to the cartoons from Revolutions. So many different things have been done with this character now that it's great seeing this. And the deluxe version, which is seen here, it really did give you the options that you wanted, right? Now, would it have been great to be able to get these guys, as a secondary release, maybe instead of a deluxe release, a regular release? Absolutely. But during the earlier times of Mondo, that wasn't possible. You know what I mean? They did one run, and once they sold out, they sold out. That was pretty much it. But this particular version of the head actually worked, like in my opinion, but it really was harkening back to the original toys. So I love that goofy nature of Mondo. I love what they do with these characters. It's really fun. And then afterwards, release after release, and Scareglow was really where things sort of started to really take off. This is where things started to get really crazy, because this is where people were very knowledgeable about this particular character, you know, the history of the character, how he came about, and what he represents to the Masters of the Universe. And arguably, this is where things started to get very, very lucrative for these particular characters in terms of the collectible market. People really wanted to see these characters in 1/6 scale, and when they've heard about Scareglow, and of course the history revolving around him, they just couldn't resist. And because of that, he literally sold out in minutes. And we do know that Mad Hatter tried on his own channel, on a live toy hunt, as he calls them, tried to get this character and was denied pretty much within minutes. It was literally insane. He had the character in his cart, it was ready to go, and it's gone. Like, it was crazy. And this started that whole idea that Mondo figures are exclusive. Mondo figures are really, really hard to get. And that's exactly the kind of thing that started happening. And then you start seeing these lineups, especially for these super special edition characters like this Skeletor MOTU Jay, right, which has these funky colors and is done by a very specific artist, right? Those became a huge thing. Same thing with Merman and these MOTU Jay type of ideas again. And now these things, you know, tend to command very high prices on the secondary market. But as things started to progress, you know, more characters started coming out. They started releasing, you know, exclusive editions from Mondo, which was also very interesting. And here with this Man-at-Arms, they just dialed it up to 11. They included an exclusive Snake Man's head, you know, the fact that you could actually remove the helmet. They had Orko in a jar, you know, these wonderful nods to the history of Masters of the Universe, and that was so wonderful. It was a great thing to see these. But those things tended to sell out very, very quickly, considering what they were, the rarity behind these things at the time. And then we fast forward closer to today, and they start releasing figures like She-Ra. And this was a huge thing at the time. They hadn't done too many female figures in the Master Universe. As a matter of fact, she's actually the first female figure. And this is amazing. She was set at $250, a timed edition, which was fun. This is when they started realizing that, you know, they needed to give at least 24 hours notice for a made-to-order type of situation. And this has never been done before. People were shocked and they were surprised, but they were very eager to actually jump on board this. And I think that was something that really helped propel them in the whole new idea of actually getting pre-orders. And I think that's great. The whole pre-order system to them was coming into line. Whereas before, it was already made to order. They had a certain amount of figures, and that was pretty much it. Their run would be done. This is one of the first characters which they actually did on a made-to-order basis. And I think it really worked out for them, considering the fact that so many people had picked these up. But that led to its own set of problems, considering that some people had certain issues with the face. Apparently, you know, the nose would get smushed in shipping. But this started something interesting with Mondo, which we're going to get to in a second, because with their next release, which of course ended up being one of the most desirable ones in the line, the deluxe version of the He-Man 1/6 scale figure. This is where things really started to change. I think a lot of people stood up and paid attention to this particular version, because unlike the other initial version of He-Man which was released, this was not based on a sort of long big chin, something that did not look like He-Man. This one, and He-Man's face is a difficult thing. A lot of people have made mention of that. He-Man is a very difficult character to get right, mainly because the first He-Man character was sort of like, his head was kind of squashed, his head was kind of thing, but there was also the Filmation aspect of it, which a lot of people grew up on. And that was a big thing, because having grown up with Filmation at the time, you sort of had this vision in your head of what He-Man is supposed to look like. And they sort of went back to that with Master Universe Classics. It was the first edition of an adult collectible style, much bigger than the Master Universe original figures, but at the same time, really collector's pieces in a lot of ways. But here we have this new He-Man, which looks stunning. I mean, he's got the look, he's got the physique, which is still based off of of off of the same buck that they've been using for years, and that's where some of the problems start happening. And we are going to get into that right now. This guy's looking great. He's a timed edition. Again, I believe it was like another 24 hours or 48 hours. I think it was like 2 days to order this guy. A full 2 days. Imagine that. A full days to actually order this guy. But yeah, it gave collectors options, and that's really where that came down to. And I'll be honest with you, I think that this was a pretty big success. I think a lot of people did jump on board with this character. With the deluxe edition, you got several looks. You were able to get the traditional He-Man, but you were also able to get Thunder Punch He-Man with his Thunder Punch armor, his cuffs, the Thunder Punch sword, and of course the Thunder Punch blast effect, the shield, and the blasting cap itself. You also got Battle Armor He-Man with its battle damage and his battle axe. Great looks overall. He came with the shield, he came with the traditional straps for the original He-Man with the Iron Cross, and the power sword. So this was everything that any Master Universe fan would have wanted. But then comes the rub. They start getting shipped out, and they shipped out early, just like She-Ra. She-Ra actually shipped out early as well. And for most collectors, this was a huge celebration. It was time to actually celebrate. You might actually get this before Christmas, which was absolutely incredible. We're talking 2022 Christmas. But then this is where things started coming apart, and I mean that literally. We have Mad Hatter talking about how his figure literally broke in two at the waist, at the pivot point, and he couldn't get it back together. The figure is in literally two pieces. You can see here it comes apart very, very easily, and he tries his best to reattach the figure at the pivot point, but no matter what he tries, it will not stick together. And this was disappointing for many collectors. But that wasn't the worst of it. Curtis Ackerman here obviously showcasing the exact same problem, that the figure just will not stick together. So he actually ends up using shrink wrap tubing to fix his problem. And for the most part, that does fix his situation, at least in the short term. Some people who actually picked this up, it was even worse than that situation. Amuse Jester on YouTube had this exact problem. He was playing around with the character, and the unthinkable happened. It literally separated from the torso, and not at the pivot point. It actually separated at the glue point. And this was actually a widespread situation. Probably not as widespread as a lot of people are making it out to be, but it was a problem. And this is really the question that a lot of us have in this situation. Can we trust Mondo? Is Mondo QC something to be concerned with? It's happened once, but not just once, it's happened multiple times. We have another creator open by chance, and they had the exact same issue. It literally broke at the glue point in the peg. Trying to check out the pivot points, and bang, it actually breaks literally in half. And this was a terrible situation for multiple collectors, and you really never want anything like that to happen. So what are collectors to do? Well, Mondo did the right thing in this case. They went ahead and replaced every single one of those figures. And in some cases, they actually allowed you to keep the original torso. This is something I've never really heard from any other company. You basically are getting a brand new He-Man, and in some cases, you pretty much can build two different versions of He-Man with the existing parts that you have. Over here, Thomas Rydberg actually showcases the shipping box. It's nothing fancy. There's no special packaging. Of course, it's just a replacement. But there it is. It's a full He-Man torso, no hands, no head, no straps. But it comes with the furry loincloth, the furry boots, and it is a perfect replacement. And he showcases how he actually glued together his original version that came from Mondo originally, and in this instance, he was allowed to keep the second body, and he can literally build another He-Man using this sculpt. Mr. Home Arcade is another example of this. He went on to demonstrate in his video how he had a similar problem as everyone else. His separated at the peg and would not snap back, similar to the way Mad Hatter had his issues as well. Here we can see him showcasing both body types. It is in this stationary position from now on, and that's the way it's going to stay. But this new body, it looks exactly the same, of course. And now Mr. Home Arcade has literally put together two He-Men from the parts that were included with the deluxe version. And from the overall review, it would seem as if Mr. Home Arcade is very satisfied with the overall results and the fact that this new He-Man torso is working perfectly. So this brings us back to the original question. Should we trust Mondo with this brand new version of Deluxe Skeletor and the upcoming Beastman and Teela figures that have been announced? I think the answer is yes. The answer is a resounding yes. A company which had its ups and downs with the Master Universe license, as we've seen with multiple releases that they've made, has learned a lot over the years. I mean, yes, they had their early versions, which some people really enjoyed them. Some people were very, very skeptical as to the overall, design and aesthetic that they were actually putting forward. But as they progressed, as they moved forward, it just kept getting better and better and better. And arguably, you could say that they've learned a great deal over the years trying to figure this out step by step. And I do believe that their latest versions have been incredible. She-Ra herself was an incredible figure. I never had any problems with the Tila that I received. And even though I did not have any issues with her head sculpt, Mondo saw it fit to replace everyone's head sculpt. It didn't matter. And that to me is a sign of commitment to their quality standards. Yes, there were some issues at the factory. Yes, there have been problems with their He-Man Deluxe figure. That much cannot be denied. But they are a company that has stood by their product and have actually released figure replacements for the figures that have had problems. And I can't say enough about that, and how that is instilling loyalty into your fan base. With this newest version of Deluxe Skeletor, I think that we can definitely rest assured that if any problems arise, they will be there to fix them or make it right. And for me, that speaks volumes. I am definitely going to be putting down my pre-order for Deluxe Skeletor starting on June 20th at 12 p.m. Central Time through June 30th at 11:59 a.m. Central Time. This is amazing, and I really do think that we can rest easy knowing that Mondo will stand behind their product 100%. Brings a lot of comfort to myself and many other collectors, because this is a Skeletor you do not want to miss out on. And it only gets better because over the weekend, on Geek Dad Life, Jay and John had an interview with two of the Mondo designers, Hector Arce, Senior Creative Director at Mondo, Peter Santamaria, Senior Creative Director at Mondo, and in that interview, they did confirm, with a question from Danny Phillips, that Swiftwind and Princess of Power characters are in development and will be released in the near future, provided that sales continue the way they are, and that the support for the Master Universe Mondo figures was strong. If you are a Master Universe fan and you really do enjoy these versions of Mondo 1/6 scale Master Universe figures, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Mondo seems to be supporting this line everywhere they can, and myself personally, I will continue to support Mondo, provided they continue delivering quality collectible action figures for adult collectors. Bravo, Mondo. Keep going. Because right now, you have the power. I want to give a huge shout out to all my Patreon and channel member supporters. Thank you so much, everybody. It's thanks to your support that this channel continues to grow, and I really could not have done this without you. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for your support, guys. It really means a lot and really helps the channel to keep growing.